Developers have a number of choices in binary and plain data formats for import and export using ActionScript. In this lesson, we'll examine how to use the native XML parser to parse out text-based data into our project. So in Flash Builder, I have a XML file here called data.xml, and this is basically an XML structure to define a person and their contact information. So we have attributes such as first name and last name, different nodes such as the address, with its own attributes of street, city, state, and so forth. We also have a phone numbers node, and within there we have a number of phone nodes with different type attributes in them, and number attributes which contain actual phone numbers. So what we're going to do is use ActionScript to load this file into Flash and parse out the data within it. So to do this, we're going to do a number of imports first. We're going to import flash.events.event, and we do this so we can listen for when our file has actually finished loading. We're going to use both a flash.net.url loader and URL request in order to request and load the specific file into our application. One of the first members that we set here is a private constant called xml_file. That's set to be a string and basically points to data.xml. So this lets us know what file we actually want to load in here. Then we set a new private variable called XML, which is typed to a XML object. This is going to contain the actual XML object that's brought in and interpreted from this XML file. And then we're going to create another private variable called XML loader, which is typed to a URL loader. And this is how we're going to get the file into our application. In our constructor function, we simply invoke another method called loadData. So within the loadData function here, we first set XML to a new XML object. We set XML loader to a new URL loader. And the URL loader requires that we create a new URL request and then pass in a string that represents the actual file. And that file is defined in this constant XML file, which we've already created. We then add an event listener to our loader, and that is of event.complete. Event.complete will fire off once this file has completed loading into our application. And when it does, we'll invoke the method parseXML. So parseXML is going to receive that event, the completion event, and we're just going to trace some stuff out here. So we'll trace out some information just saying that the file has been loaded. And then we're actually going to set our XML object equal to the target.data property from our event that comes through that completion object. So that's going to take that XML from its string form and actually create an XML object out of that and assign it to the XML object that we've already created. So the next thing we do is we're going to trace out a whole bunch of data from there. So everything that we saw back in this data.xml file, such as name information, address, phone numbers, will be traced out in this fashion. And we're just concatenating some labels with string data from the XML object. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to identify our XML object, and we're going to go into the person node, and then get the first name attribute off of that. This uses a system called E4X, which is a little API for parsing XML that's built into ActionScript 3. when you see this little @ symbol here, that simply means that we want the attribute named first name on this person node. So if we go back over to our data XML, we can see that the person node has an attribute called first name, and that's what we're bringing out here. Same thing for last name, and then when we get into address, we simply go down into the address node and start pulling attributes from that, such as street, city, and state. So if you remember back in our XML file, we have a node for phone numbers in which we actually have multiple phones. So how we're handling this is that we're using a simple for loop. And this for loop is checking against xml.person.phonenumbers.length. This is going to bring back the actual number of phone nodes within our phone number node. So this will tell us how many phone numbers we have. And then we just loop through all of them and trace out both the type and the actual number for each of those phones. And to do that, we go through xml.person.phonenumbers.phone, and we're going to a specific index of phone, since that we have a number of different phones here. So it'll start off at index 0, and then the next time it'll hit index 1. And we'll grab the type attribute and number attribute off of that and spit it out in our output window. So let's run this. All right, so we can see that the file loads up successfully. It parses the XML and it spits out the results. First name, last name, street, city, state, postal code, and then our 2 phone objects right there. So perfect. So in this lesson, we've seen how to load in an XML file and parse it through the XML object in ActionScript.